I just had such a good conversation with my dear friend Andrew Spikes. He and I are part of a Christian business owner group together, and he runs a fantastic organization. I don't want to tell you anything about it. Man, he drops so much great information for those looking to grow in their leadership, potentially get into business, or take their business to the next level. So here's my dear friend Andrew. Welcome to Market Mavericks. I'm Matthew Eford. Join me as I speak with leaders who are redefining industries in every corner of the market. From startups to established businesses, we'll uncover the strategies, challenges, and insights that drive success. Get ready to be inspired by the Mavericks who are shaping the future of business. Welcome to Market Mavericks. I have my dear friend Andrew here with me. He and I are in a men's group together that meet once a month. We met through that. He's got an incredible business. I'm so excited to hear him and some of the wisdom he's going to share. So, Andrew, let's just start off. Tell us about your business. Tell us about your role within your business and what you're doing.
Yeah, man. I'm excited to chat with you. A little bit about me. So I started and run today Missio, Missio.
Okay.
And Missio is the word Missio is Latin for mission, which really kind of leads to the next part of this, and that is what do we do and why do we do it, and that's that sort of thing. And we are a digital marketing agency with a very clear mission to glorify God with digital marketing. And so that's why we exist. That's our purpose. And it really stems into a couple of different avenues, which I'm happy to dive into. But it's all centered around digital marketing, but it's really within the context of helping um, organizations, brands who are led by Christian leaders who bring their faith to work and they want to work with, a marketing company who knows what they're doing and who also brings their faith to work because obviously impacts, you know, uh, strategies and decision making and how we intertwine together and that sort of thing. So um, there I serve as the founder CEO, and that's what we do. Today, we're the fastest growing Christian marketing agency in the country.
I love that.
Um,
Yeah, congratulations. You've been on the Inc. 5000 now twice, 2 years in a row.
Right.
That's fantastic. So tell us a little bit about the Inc. 5000. Like what is that? How did you get that award? Who does that acknowledge? For those of us who don't really
Yeah,
know.
fantastic question. Yeah, so it's ran by Inc. So Inc. magazine is the leader of this. They've been doing this forever. It's right up there with like the Forbes, right? So
Yeah.
Forbes has their own Inc. has theirs, and it's geared towards um, business leadership. Anyway, they do a running list of the fastest growing companies in the country, and it's they don't have a specific category or anything like they do it across all categories.
Okay.
And so, from marketing to AI to healthcare to business services, they essentially look at a 3-year time span of your growth.
Wow.
And most it's all top line,
Okay.
which I'm sure we'll talk about
Yeah,
bottom
sure.
line at some point in this conversation, but it's all top line. Um, but yeah, no, it's really about sales and revenue. And so, have you seen that grow? And so, yeah, then they just do a running list of 5,000 of them, of the fastest growing in the country.
That's
So,
fantastic. Well, congratulations. That's a
yeah.
big deal, and we look forward to getting some more insights and where you found that growth. So, but before we get there, talk to me about how you got into business ownership. Like, what were you doing before you started this? How did you feel that call as a believer, as a fellow believer, feel called from God? But how did you make that leap?
Mm. Yeah. So I you have to be part of me really. Well, I would say I really believe that entrepreneurs are just built different and they're wired different. And even if you're working at a job, you're still wired to be an entrepreneur. It's just kind of how you think. You're a builder.
Yeah.
And so I've always been a builder. I like to build things, not in construction, but I like to invent, like to create, like to systematize. That's just how I am. Um, and so I've always had this itch to scratch around being an entrepreneur. And it just kind of I always just took side steps of where I was in life. And so here's what I mean by that is that So I grew up. My dad was a worship pastor and then an executive pastor. Grew up in the church. I was
Okay.
at church more than I was at home, and so uh, I had that context. But I pursued a career in marketing, and so I kind of just sidestep and said, well, are there any churches that I could help? And I tried a bunch of stuff. And this was just burning the midnight oil, side hustling. I had a 9 to 5, which we'll get to in a moment. But anyway, so I would just, at nighttime and in the early morning, I just try different things. I failed a lot.
Okay.
I thought, hey, I'm gonna be a course creator.
Yeah.
Bombed, man.
Yeah.
I was awful at that. It was terrible. I tried some other things, and for multiple reasons, I failed at that. Long story short, I tapped into this need where churches needed help with social media,
Okay.
and because they didn't have an in-house social media team, and so what I my wife wouldn't let me spend our own money on this crazy harebrained idea.
Okay.
So I went out and got a five. I had no credit, right, as a business. I'm
Sure.
I'm not a big believer on debt, and so I had no credit, and so I got a $500 credit card,
Okay.
and I with a $500 limit, and I went and bought $500 worth of Google ads in the UK. And here's why. Um, but I bought $500 of Google Ads in the UK for social media for churches and social and Christian marketing agency.
Wow.
And the reason I did it in the UK was because at the time I was head of search engine marketing at UPS. And so I had a big boy job, right? And I
Sure.
can't just check out of my big boy job to do this. So what I thought was, well, I'll run sales calls and do client calls in the morning when it's 2 p.m., 1 p.m. their time. It's
Uh,
6 a.m. my time.
yeah.
And I had an hour and a half commute to Atlanta to UPS. And so I thought, well, I'll just do sales calls and client calls on my commute. And so that's what I did. And so I did it, got leads out of the UK and Europe. And I did the exact same thing on my way home. I'd go buy more ads in California,
That's
which is
fantastic.
4 hours.
Yeah.
And on my commute home, I can make sales calls and while I'm in my hour and a half commute. So anyway, long story short, I just started small. Every dollar I made, because I had a full-time job, every dollar I made, I just put right back into the business.
Sure.
And I didn't take any money out. I just kept on investing in it and it just snowballed
That's
from
so
there.
cool. So how long did you do that as a side hustle? Like how long did you stay at UPS from when you first started buying ads in Europe, which is brilliant, by the way, and then in California? What was that trajectory? What was kind of the path of you going from this is a side hustle to this is a viable, I can do this for and support my family?
Hmm. Um, so I started working I was dabbling in this before, like I failed a lot so 2014 is when I started my LLC.
Okay.
Okay. 2016 is when I started working at UPS.
Okay.
From 2016 to 2021, yeah, it was 2021. So I from that time, is span of years, um, I had built up a core book of business. I had about 13 team members.
Okay.
Uh, because basically I couldn't do the work myself. I just hired
Sure.
people, and because
Sure.
I had a big boy job, right? I had to do my thing. So I'd hire people, and I had about 13 at this time at this point.
Nice.
And I forgot what the number was, but in revenue or in customers, I was like, I got to get to that number before I feel comfortable taking the leap. And by this point, I had built up um basically a fund that I've accumulated that, hey, come hell or high water, like if something tanks, I have some cushion,
Sure.
right? So it's 2020, 2021. I gave in September, I gave UPS my 6 months notice,
Okay.
and no, sorry, 2020, I gave them a 6 months notice, and then February was my last day of 2021.
Okay.
Does it make sense?
Yeah. Yeah. Yeah.
Okay.
So starting out, you found out you could do the sales calls when you drove, which again,
Mhm.
brilliant, taking time. You had time during your day, and instead of saying I don't have time, no, you're leveraging the time that you have, which was that commute. That's fantastic. Very, very smart. When you're hiring people, so a lot of business owners will struggle with, do I do 1099? Do I do W-2? Some business owners or some employees may not have a clue what that even means. Can you give us some
Mhm.
insight into your business structure? Did you go right out and hire them as W-2? Did you start out with 1099? What's your kind of mix now?
Yeah, so everyone started out as 1099.
Okay.
And I bought essentially I would hire specialists at a 1099 level for essentially it's like a bucket of hours and a task to do.
Okay.
So, give an example. For social media for churches, I would hire a social media content writer, right, for whatever, 5, 10, 20 hours
Sure.
a week. And I would hire them and then I would go hire a graphic designer
Cool.
10 hours a week, right? And I'd hire a success manager for 20. And so I just started there,
Cool.
1099 for all of them. So the 13 that I mentioned earlier were all 1099s.
Okay.
And it's sort of developed into our culture of being a fairly flexible culture. I mean, we're all 100% remote and we're 35 people now
Nice.
and we're all remote. Um, so anyway, so everyone was 1099. A couple years ago, I did make our leadership team, I did transition our leadership team and our success managers, which you can think of them as like account managers,
Okay.
to W-2s.
Cool.
And the reason I did that was because the business out of that core group needed a little bit more definition around. Like hey,
Okay.
you have some hours you got to work, and me asking you to work certain hours, me kind of being on you a little bit more.
Yeah.
You can't be a contractor at that
Yeah.
point. I needed a little bit more buy-in.
Yeah.
So
Yeah, you're getting outside of the 1099 realm.
yeah.
You're starting to put in some more. So now you have a mix of 1099 and W-2. That's fantastic. Talk to us about, you said culture. That's a hot button word that gets tossed around a lot, but how did you navigate your team? How did you navigate leadership building, team building, influencing culture? How did you define that out? And then specifically, as you made that transition to bring some people to W-2, how have you found success in implementing that across the whole organization?
Culture is huge, and I have learned this the hard way. It's very important. Here's my tip. You have to drive the culture you want, or else a culture will be created one way or the other
Yeah,
that will drive you backwards.
yeah, it's a
And
great point.
because the culture is what it is. Like you cannot have a culture. Like the culture will be there. It's just either going to be a good culture, or it's going to be a bad culture, or it's going to be a thriving, or it's going to be an entrepreneurial one, or a corporate folk. Like there is going to be a culture.
Yeah,
So you're either going to drive it or it's going to drive you. So a couple of things that I ingrained um, in culture building is the real. I'm big on one-on-ones. There's just one example. I'm big on
okay,
one-on-ones.
okay,
I think that drives culture. I think it builds trust. One thing that we try to drive in our culture is servanthood, right? So leadership by serving. And I believe one-on-ones are a time for the leader to serve the person they're leading.
cool,
And so that's one example. So we do big on one-on-ones for the person, for the direct report, not for the boss. Number two is I refer to people as team members, not employees, as an
okay,
example. How can we do that? Another thing about culture is um, really driving and letting your mission and your core values not just be wall material. It's got to be legitimate and you got to go all in and you have to hire and fire people based on core values.
okay,
And so that's how another way we drive culture. Another way I drive culture, I just got off it this morning. I did a leadership talk with our leaders, and we focused on the five dysfunctions of a team.
nice. Yeah, yeah.
Really
Patrick
popular.
Luciani. Yeah,
And so that's another way of me trying to drive culture is by leadership development. Can I build them up? And can it so you as the leader, you that's your thing. Your
Sure.
thing is going to be about culture driving.
So
So
let's take the you gave three great things. The number
yep.
one, the one to ones. Number two, the culture core values,
Yep.
hiring, firing off those, and then number three, investing in your leadership team. So let's take each one of those and kind of break them down a little bit more. Talk
Mhm.
to me about how you're doing the first one there. What are some ways that you're scheduling your one to ones? Do you schedule them across all 35 employees, or do you schedule them just with your direct reports? And then how does that trickle down? Like how have you structured that time?
Yeah. Well, for one, I had to build an org chart. So
Okay,
as you get larger, right, as you go from from 5 to 10 or 10 to 20, you have to start to redefine your org chart. And your org chart dictates who reports to who,
sure.
obviously, right? And with this org chart, every leader must have a one-on-one. There shouldn't be, if you are a team member here, you will have a one-on-one.
Okay,
And it will be weekly or bi-weekly, depending on, part-time, full, etc. Um, so it's just ingrained. It's just how we do it. Everyone does one-on-ones. And so you do it with your direct reports. So I don't do it with all 35, right?
sure.
I do it with like three,
Okay,
right? And then those three have 3 to 7,
okay,
and then those have their own. And so there's this trickle down approach.
cool.
That's tip. The other part I do is I have a template that I used. I used it at UPS. I use it today. And it's this template that the person prepares in advance of our meeting.
Nice.
So the team member, this is their time. And so they list the things out on the agenda ahead of time. We do a Google Sheet of things they need help on, things they want to inform me on, like as an update.
Okay,
And then I have a section at the bottom, if we get to it, that I want to talk about. But it's priority number 3.
cool.
And so they prepare it in advance of the meeting. It's not me doing it for them. They do it for me. And so, because it's their time, they dictate what we want to talk about.
Sure. And then how
Uh,
long is typically do you have those set out? Is it an hour? Is it 30 minutes? Well, what are you trying to structure that across your organization?
it's 30 minutes to an hour.
Okay.
Yeah, it depends on the role.
Sure.
So actually I have one that's an hour and a half.
Okay.
So, but that's with a key leadership team member,
Yeah,
right?
yeah.
And
Sure.
we're going in deep, right?
Sure.
So yeah, it's 30 minutes to an hour and a half.
But I love that format, right? It allows your team to bring up things to you. It's a safe place. It's a regular check-in with them that instead of saying, "Hey, I didn't have a clue this was going on," you have a regular time to be engaged with the folks that are reporting to you, but you're allowing them to dictate most of the meeting. The
Hmm.
latter part of that's your part, which I love that just the emphasis that you're putting on, hey, this time is for you. This is not a
Hmm.
time for me to beat you over the head with something. This is not a time for me to tell you how wrong you're doing. No, this is a time for you, for me to invest in you. I love that perspective.
Yeah, the worst thing that you can do is cancel a head to head because you have nothing on the agenda to talk about.
Yeah.
Right. Like if I had a person or if it was you and I and I was like, hey Matthew, don't worry about it today. I don't have anything to talk about. You're like, well, I got like 7 things I got to talk about, right?
Yeah.
And it just the value equation just is off.
Sure.
So
No, that's an excellent additional point. So now let's go into the second piece, the core values.
mhm,
How have you found success? Number one, defining them. How did you go through the defining process? Who all did you include in that process? And then number
mhm.
two, how do you said you hire and fire off of that. So give us some practical advice on hiring and firing off your core values.
Yeah, initially, so the core values, I spent a lot of time on this. I lost sleep. This is not just something that I just like, all right, guys, we need some core values. Like, what do you got? It wasn't like that.
Yeah.
I could tell in the DNA and the culture of the company, you just got to feel for it. And it just needed some guidance.
Okay.
What is our DNA? And it just needed it. And we needed an identity. You hear about sports teams. What's your identity?
Sure.
And we needed an identity. So I felt it. And um, a couple of the core values I initiated. I did not say, "Hey team, what do you have?" And that's some would say that's not collaborative. But as the leader, if this is your baby, part of me you're gonna live and die on this baby. So like,
Yeah.
part of me thinks you should go all in on yourself, at least taking the first stab at it. My second point is that I did feed it to my leadership team, got their input on it and their reaction,
Okay.
but I, as the leader, blocked myself off and went on a run or went like this is a Andrew thing. That's just how I did it. A couple of things I looked for in core values for me in particular is I wanted to keep them small. I didn't need 12.
Sure.
I wanted 5.
Okay.
If 5, I could go 3 to 5, but I didn't want 12.
Sure.
I landed on 5. Um, and the third bullet point is I made them all actions. I didn't want the core values to be, I wanted something that I could walk into a room and I could like say something and it meant
Yeah.
here's what I mean. A core value could be like integrity. Like, could you imagine walking into a room and just being like,
Yeah.
integrity?
Yeah.
Kind of awkward, right?
Yeah.
But if I walked into a room and I said, hey guys, execute with excellence, it starts with a verb, right? Execute with
Yeah.
excellence. And so I wanted that to be it. So our core values are execute with excellence, love your neighbor, make a difference. So let me back up. Execute with excellence. Execute is a big word. We're not going to just sit back. We got to execute and we got to do it
Sure.
with excellence. Number 2 is love your neighbor. And in the Bible, it says, Jesus was asked, what's the greatest commandment? And he said, love the Lord your God. But his very next breath was,
Yeah.
and love your neighbor.
Yeah.
Right. And so I thought that was really important. Make a difference. So this is like, hey, let's do work that matters and on purpose. Fourth is think like an entrepreneur, be scrappy, be innovative, be conscious of money. And number 5 is take ownership. So,
I love that.
and then
Yeah.
you asked about how we hire and fire,
Yeah.
but
Let me touch on that just real quick. I
yeah.
love that they're actionable, right? When we made ours, we wanted to get to where ours is if you ain't first, you're last, and it's feedback, integrity, respect, share, growth, and teamwork. But what we did was we defined out what each one of those looked like. We defined out and
Mm,
said, okay, what does it look like for us to give and receive feedback? And so we have a little slogan that we say for each one of ours is that same idea that it's not just a high and tidy word or integrity. That's one of ours. It's not just we're going to put that on the wall because what that means to me and what it means to of an employee could be two very different things. But when I
mm,
clearly, as the leader, as I clearly define out this is exactly what it means within this organization, it makes it a lot easier to hold people accountable to it, right?
for sure. You got to clarify it.
Yeah. Yeah. And that's part of your role as a leader is clarifying. So I love that you've done that in each of your core values. So now let's go into the you hire and fire. Talk us through kind of the application of that, please.
So when we hire, I'm typically the last interviewer. And by this point, um, today, and then I'll talk about what I did years ago when it was a smaller team. But today, what I do is, so the hiring managers who report to me have really kind of checked the box on skill sets, the technical side, right, the capacity,
Yeah.
all those things. When I start talking with them, I literally get a Google Doc in the interview and I write down every core value and I'm taking notes. And I ask questions that get at those core values,
Okay.
right? So I'll ask like broader questions. Hey, what are you proud of? Right? When's the time that you failed? So I won't say, hey, what do you think about executing with X? It's not that.
Sure.
It's I'll go like take other questions and through the conversation, I'm really looking at those 5 things. Do they like are they holding themselves accountable to excellence? Like did there when I said tell me about the time you failed, they were like, oh my gosh, I missed the number. I was distraught. I can't believe it. I lost sleep. Like then I'm like, okay, they actually care, right?
Yeah.
They
Yeah. Yeah.
and so I'll just kind of pick up on those things and in an interview, I will write them out. Execute with excellence, love your neighbor, etc. And I'll just say, hey, I'll rate it on a 1 to 10. How do I feel about it? So That's how we hire. That's one area of how we hire. Obviously, we have some tests that people go through, and
Okay.
we kind of pick up on some things there. So there's a quantitative and a qualitative point to that.
Cool.
In terms of firing, we try to do we do a good job of kind candor of telling someone where we feel like they're missing the boat a
Okay.
couple of times, right? And after we have given some feedback and said, hey man, the way you're treating this person is not loving your neighbor, and we'll anchor it back.
Cool.
Hey, one of our core values, as you know, is loving your neighbor, and we're just not seeing that. And because of X, Y, and Z. So we'll anchor it back to that. And then if we have a couple conversations and then we just part ways.
Yeah.
So.
I think it's very practical, and it gives, again, it's clarity, right? It gives your team the clear understanding of this is what matters to this organization. These are core values. That's what core values mean. But here's how they practically matter to you. And we're going to make it very clear what we're holding you accountable to.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah.
Yep,
I
for sure.
love that. So around here, we love to ask about mistakes, right? We've all made them. You've shared some of yours, but tell us about a mistake you've made over the life of your business, and what's something you learned from
How much time do we have?
it. Just give us
Gotta
one. Just give us one.
give you one. Okay. All right, I'll give you a good one. Hiring people. Um, so I gosh, can I give two?
Yeah,
Can I
sure.
give
Yeah,
two?
yeah, of course.
I got like a billion, but I'll focus on two that I think that this audience could appreciate. Number one is early on, I was terrible at hiring people, and
Okay.
I would hire people that um, we are a Christian organization, right? And so I had this mindset a little bit that like, well, they love God, they mean well, they got a
Yeah,
heart of gold,
yeah,
bless their heart. Like I'm like, because I'm like, oh, they just get it, right? They're all in on the mission. They're all in on the mission. Well, what would happen is that they were all in on the mission, but completely lacked the capacity or the skill set or the technical infrastructure to do the work,
yeah,
and I got up to 65 people, and it felt like a youth group.
yeah. Okay.
Like no one had any accountability, like felt the accountability to the result. They love God. You ask them to pray, they will go to town. But I basically had a really thriving youth group, is what it felt like.
Okay.
And there was a lack of accountability, lack of results, lack of and I didn't weed people out. I just was like, hey, I'm going to hire fast. They love God. They get our mission, and we're going. So I learned early on that was a problem. And so since then, what I've really focused on hiring.
Okay.
So now we do quite a bit of testing early on, right at the top of the bat, for technical capabilities, skills, um, cognitive ability. I
Okay.
go pretty big on that.
Okay.
Motivation. I try to see like, do they own like, do they care? And so I'm big on tests. I probably
What
spend
kind
way.
of test? What kind of test have you found successful?
I have two. So one is the Wonderlic.
Okay.
Okay.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
Wonderlic test for cognitive ability, your personality, and your motivation.
Okay.
And it's just like, can they get it?
Sure.
Can they can they get it? The other one that I do is the acronym is OMG, which I use it for sales and success management.
Okay. Yeah, I'm not
Uh,
familiar with that one.
and yeah, I'll send it to you.
Yeah, please do.
I get it through a good friend of mine, and it's really paid off. Like right now, we're hiring a salesperson, and it goes through like the sales testing
Cool.
and obviously provides recommendations. So I'm big on testing. So that's one mistake. The other mistake I made, this was huge. This almost broke up my business.
Okay.
Is that I would hire and my expenses were out of control, and I looked at the revenue, not the profit. So What
Oh
I
yeah.
mean by that is, so we get up to $1 million in revenue. Well, I would spend $1 million in cost. And at the end, I'm working my tail off, hurting 65 people with $0. Like I'm practically losing money,
Yeah,
right? Can't support my family. My bank account goes down the drain. You got to keep a close eye on the cost relative to the profit.
sure.
And so that was one of the
What
big.
have you found successful in helping you be more profit focused?
So there's a ratio that I've leaned into. Well, there's a couple things. One is I ask, well, I'll talk about the ratio. So operating ratio, right, is
Okay.
it's OR. And what this is the cost of whatever it is you're looking at
Yeah.
associated with the revenue. So an
Okay.
example would be for so if we make $1 million in revenue, how much does my success management and customer service team, how much does that cost as a ratio to my revenue?
Sure.
Um, Before my success management cost to revenue was like 7, right? So 70%. So I make $1 million in revenue. I'm paying out $700,000 in salary costs for success managers and customer service.
A
That's
lot.
not,
Yeah,
that's
that's
a
a lot.
lot. It's crazy, right? Well, I do some research in there and I find out, dude, this should be like 15 or 20
Yeah.
tops,
Yeah.
right? And so I'm like, holy cow, right? No wonder I'm losing money because if 70 is going there, 20 is going here, I'm over,
Yeah.
right?
Yeah. Yeah.
And so anyway, I kind of get some benchmarks and some plans for where I want to be. And so I say,
Okay.
hey, success management needs to be between 10 and 20.
Okay.
My, cost of good or cost of labor needs
Sure.
to be at 50
Okay.
for social media.
Sure.
So I have benchmarks, and then every hiring decision that I make and how we manage our team is how does this impact the OR, the cost relative to the revenue we're bringing in.
Yeah, it's so
Uh,
smart.
so that's how I do it.
I had a mentor say that revenue is vanity, profit is
Mhm.
sanity. And
Yeah.
and I said, yeah, it's so smart. I mean, we've had an opportunity as lighting pros to win some awards for our revenue wise. But man, there were some times in that high growth that we were burning through cash, and we were just not structuring it well. And so it's so smart that you've taken a step back and you said, okay, it's not just that we're hitting these high numbers, which top line revenue grows, like and it drives that growth. But at the end of the day, if you're not making money, you just have a very busy job. You're not a
Yeah.
business owner. You're not growing something that can outlive you.
Mm-mm. I remember the first time, we talked about it earlier, the first time I made the Inc. 5000, we were number 268. And of course, I said like even 30 minutes ago, I'm like, that's top line revenue,
Yeah,
right?
yeah, yeah.
It's not the bottom. Well, I remember getting it, and like I just didn't feel it. I was like, it doesn't feel good.
Yeah.
Like it just doesn't feel like what's this for? I'm
It
losing
didn't
money.
it didn't practically mean anything.
Mm-mm.
It's just a thing that you got. It's a marker that says, "Hey, we got it. It's cool." But man, I'm having a hard time making payroll tomorrow.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah. I
So I
wish someone
love.
would do a reward for profit.
Yeah, that one's harder to do. Obviously, I read a few years ago, Profit First.
Yep.
I can put it in the show notes. That was a game changing book for us,
Me too.
of just the idea of we're not in this just to have a job. Every
Hmm.
business must make profit. And as a believer, there's a lot of cool things we can do as a man on mission, for the Lord, and I can do a lot of things with the profit that my business makes, and I choose to do that. But if I'm not stewarding that well, I'm just spinning my wheels. Yeah, it's sanity. It's truly insanity. So talk to us. Let's take a little bit of a pivot here. Thank you for sharing all that. Talk to me about the work life pull. I don't say balance because I think that's a myth, but talk to me as a dad, as a husband. How have you tried to navigate the pull between work life and home life?
Yeah. Well, this is actually a great segue because profit is oxygen.
Yeah,
Profit is oxygen. If you're losing money and you're having a hard time, you yourself aren't getting any oxygen. It's oxygen to the business, which means it's oxygen to you to survive, right? You have to have it to survive. And if you're losing oxygen, it does have a role in your family life.
yeah, it's a
You know,
great point.
you come home like I work from home. I'm walking downstairs to my family and I'm just a wreck up here,
Yeah,
and I can't and it's hard, your fuse is shorter, right? Because you're stressed out and overwhelmed, and your fuse is shorter, and your 4-year-old like just jumps off the couch, and you're like normally be like, hey, don't do the come on now,
yeah,
don't do It was like, don't jump off the couch, it's like, but you're already wound tight because the business has it feels like you're suffocating because you're not having any profit. The other sidestep from profit, yeah, there are several things that if you can't compartmentalize it wisely, it'll take a toll on your family life. And the key to this is as much as physically possible, as much as compartmentalize. So
okay,
step number one is, again, it's hard for entrepreneurs, but have a start time and have a stop time. Just because you're an entrepreneur doesn't mean that you work. And you hear these gurus on TikTok and everything like, I work 20 hours a day. Well, yeah, you're also leading to a divorce. So
yeah, yeah,
you know, um, don't have a stop time. Now, if you got to go be with family at 5, 6, whatever o'clock, and then come back to whatever you have to do at 10 o'clock later that night, go do that. But don't burn through family time for the sake of the business, because what happens is your business becomes a mistress to your family, and you don't want that. So compartmentalize as much as possible, and and B, depending on how your relationship is with your spouse, bring them in on it. I actually do get advice, a lot of great advice from my wife. She's not necessarily a quote unquote business person, but when I talk about just like gut checking things, I'll get her input on it. I'm like, hey, I got this little thing going on. What do you think? Um,
yeah. I love that. It's both of those are incredible little nuggets that I think people could easily look over. Number one is your schedule. You as a business owner, if you are strategic, you can control your schedule instead of your schedule controlling you. And if you allow your schedule to control you, then you will put out fires all day long and you will never ever be able to turn it off. But if
Mhm.
you're able to put good systems in place, which we've talked about earlier, hire the right people, which we talked about earlier, but also just allow yourself to step away from the business, even if you got to go back to it, right? That was one of the best decisions that we made as a couple and as a family, is asking Hannah that kind of same question of when can I be helpful to you? And it's that kind of 5 to 7 o'clock. Okay, well, I'm going to do the absolute best that I can to shut it off at 5 o'clock. Do I always do that great? Of course not. But overall, I typically do a pretty good job of shutting it down right around 5:30, putting my phone away, and then I come back after the boys are asleep. And I get engaged back with the business. I take care of what I need to, and then I get up early and I get things taken care of. So I love that piece. Um, I also love the piece of including your spouse in it. Just as a sounding board, I do the exact same thing with Hannah. That I will. She's a great barometer because she loves me. She's a goodwill person. She has my best interest at heart. She knows that I'm trying to do things well for our family and for the Lord. And there's a perspective that she has that's just different than mine. And so I love that idea that you include her in that.
Yeah, I think going back to the schedule, you can use being an entrepreneur if you're doing this full time to your advantage, right? So
Yeah.
block out a date. Like if you're working at a 9 to 5 or somewhere, you might not have as much control over your schedule as you do now.
Yeah.
If you got more control, block out, if the kids go to school, block out an afternoon date, if for lunch,
Yeah.
and like take advantage, like enjoy like that part, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So
That's an excellent point. So talk to us. Let's continue on. I loved books. I know you're an avid reader. I'm an avid reader.
mhm,
Between Audible and hard copy books like those behind me,
mhm.
if you could get one book in the hand of every potential business owner, new business owner, or existing business owner, what's the book that you would say, hey, I've got to get this book in their hand? Or what is the book that you've read in the last 12 months that you referred the most to?
This is great. I'm going through my list now,
Okay.
actually. Um, uh, you know, dang it. Um, okay, I'll just do a book in the last. You know what I would do? As I would say, go find a good autobiography.
Okay.
That's
I
what I
like
would
that.
do.
Yeah.
Is
Cool.
I would go down the I'm a big fan of autobiography, and I'm gonna name a couple, but
Sure.
that have meant something to me. But I would go down the realm of an autobiography, and here's why. Books are can be really helpful how-tos. You mentioned Profit First. The guy also wrote Clockwork, and
Yep.
you got Traction and all these. Those are all great. As an entrepreneur, what I like to see is the story that the entrepreneur or the leader goes through.
Yeah.
The go get them. And so one is the ride of a lifetime. He's not necessarily an entrepreneur, but he's a big leader. Bob Iger
Yeah.
is the CEO of Disney now, and he talks pen to paper, talks about his ride of a lifetime, like coming up. Um, and so that's one. Another one is Shoe Dog with Phil
Okay.
Knight.
Okay.
That's a big one. I would go with Shoe Dog with Phil Knight. And again, it just walks the entrepreneur like through their mindset, like
Yeah.
their story, how they did their first deal, how they sold shoes out the back of their trunk, how like all that kind of gritty stuff just to get inspired. So
Yeah.
I got more, but you told me just
No, no, no.
one.
That's good. That's great. I appreciate that. So let's end on this. I love to ask, what kind of advice would you give to yourself starting out? If you could go back, what kind of advice would you try to give yourself that may be really applicable to somebody who's either just starting their business or looking to get into business?
Um, so number one is I would do what I did and start something as a side hustle
Okay.
first. Personally, this is just me, right? There's not a so first off, actually I got a couple pieces of advice. Number one is every guru is a guru just on their perspective,
Yeah.
but there are
Excellent
multiple
point.
perspectives out there.
Yeah.
There's not a single way to be a great entrepreneur or even a great leader. Steve Jobs is different than Bob Iger, who is different than Phil Knight,
Yeah.
right? Who's different than Elon. Like they're all different. So I'll just give you first off my perspective of what worked for me, and I will tell myself and give myself the wisdom all over again. Number one is do a proof of concept. The geeky way is to do product market fit, right? Find a problem that you can solve. Be as scrappy as possible. Do that on the side. Don't leave your side job, your day job to do this, because what you do is if you leave your date, you put it way too much pressure on trying to crack the code of this product market fit too fast, and then it gets stressful.
Yeah.
Number two is if you keep your day job and you do this on the side, is you can build up a bank account full of expenses. Um, Build up $100,000, right? And just put in the bank. And in that way, when crap hits the fan, and it will, you have something to go to.
It always does. Yeah.
It always does. Because otherwise you're in scarcity mode. You're like, I don't know, I'm gonna do payroll to your point earlier. And you don't want to be in that book. Build up a bank account, $100,000 or whatever, and just let it sit there until you get. My third advice to myself would be is you don't have to be 100% confident to take the leap from your corporate gig to your entrepreneur life.
I love
You
that.
need to be like 80% confident.
Yeah.
75% confident, not 100%. It's like having a baby. You're never 100% ready,
Yeah.
right?
Great point. Yeah. Yeah. No, you're
You're
definitely
never
not.
you're never ready. I'm not ready. I need more money. I need a better job. We need a better house. We need it. You're never ready. But if you have a proof of concept that really works, you've built up $100,000 or whatever the number is worth of expenses, get 75-80% confident in what you're doing, and then take the leap.
I love that.
That would be my advice.
That's incredible advice. What a great way to end a wonderful conversation, Andrew. I really appreciate your time. I appreciate you sharing all the nuggets and the feedback, the insights into your organization, the success and failures that y'all have had. So if somebody wants to get connected with you, how do they get connected to you?
Yeah, so a couple, you can connect with me personally. I'm on LinkedIn quite a bit,
Okay.
so you can connect with me on LinkedIn. Andrew Spikes, if I think that's probably the most applicable for this audience.
Yeah.
That way. Our business is Missio, and so our URL is missiodigital.com.
Okay.
So that's how they can get in touch with a company if they want to
That's
check it out.
fantastic. Yeah, I'll make sure to put both those in the show notes. Well, thank you everyone for joining us again, and thank you, Andrew, for sharing the wisdom. And we will be with you soon. Thanks, and God bless. Thank you for joining us on this episode of Market Mavericks. We hope you're walking away inspired and ready to take your own adventure to the next level. Don't forget to follow the show to keep up with our latest episodes. And if you enjoyed today's conversation, make sure to subscribe, share it with others who could benefit. And hey, if you know a market maverick who has a story that needs to be heard, please drop their name in the comments. We would love to bring their insights to the show. Until next time, keep pushing boundaries and leading with purpose.